Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is We Are the One, Lincolnshire FA's official grassroots football podcast, where we speak to the amazing people who make football happen in our area. My name is Zack Leader.
My name is Ben Pearce, and this week we'll be speaking to Lynn Green. Lynn is the current welfare officer at Barton Inclusive and Barton Town Junior Football Club, and she is also the chair of the Lincolnshire Women and Girls Football League. We'll be speaking to Lynn about the upcoming Play Safe weekend and other elements of welfare and club-related environment.
Enjoy. Okay, so we're here with Lynn Green. Lynn, do you want to just tell us which clubs, which league you're from?
Okay, so I'm Club Welfare Officer at Barton Town, Club Welfare Officer for Barton Inclusive, and I'm the Chair and Welfare Officer for the QuickLine Lincolnshire Women and Girls League.
Fantastic. So Lynn, could you sort of start by telling us what inspired you to take on the roles of Club Welfare Officer and why safeguarding is such a priority for yourself?
Well, it seemed like a natural progression for me. I've worked in child protection for 10, 15 years. So when my local non-league club, Barton Town, was looking for a welfare officer, it seemed just a natural thing to do. I'd been coaching my son's under nines team for a while, so I was already involved in football. So it just seemed like a natural step to take, really.
Fantastic.
So, Lynn, you've obviously got a lot of hats in football. You're a lady with many expertise. So, in terms of the practices that you have for both the clubs at Barton and your role as chair at the Women and Girls League, how do you ensure that you get consistency across those different formats? I mean, are the practices different from clubs to league, or do you generally sort of see the same things?
So we make sure that everybody's done the relevant training. So all the coaches have done all the FA safeguarding training. We try to encourage all the parents to do the safeguarding for parents training as well, because then that's really important. And just always being consistent in how we treat coaches and parents. So that tends to work, and it's the same at both clubs and the league. It's the principles are the same.
And do you think you've seen in both those clubs, you've seen growth quite quickly? Have you had to change things in terms of manpower or practices or online presence? Are there things that you've had to change as you've grown as a club, or for both those clubs?
I mean, massively. So Barton Inclusive, we've now got a Barton Inclusive Hull branch across the river. So we've actually recruited another welfare officer to look after them, because it was just too much for me to do. I mean, as you know, I don't like saying no, take on a lot of roles, but I just couldn't cope with everything. We're taking on more and more teams, which means more and more coaches. And certainly Barton Inclusive, we try to have several coaches for each team, and they all need DBS checking, and they all need all the welfare stuff. So yeah, we've taken on another welfare officer there. As you say, growth with both clubs. So with that comes more coaches, more coaching assistants, and they all need to be trained, and they all need to have a reasonable knowledge of what safeguarding is, and how that relates to their role within the club.
Okay, thanks very much. I mean, I'm going to move on to sort of women and girls football specifically now. And again, another example where, as a league, you've had huge growth very quickly, which is fantastic to see. I mean, the stats don't lie in relation to the league and the football in terms of, for us, from a discipline perspective and from a safeguarding welfare perspective, there are a lot less reports in the particularly the girls section of the league.
Mm-hmm.
This is quite a blunt question, but why do you think that is? Do you think there's a different tolerance level, or is it just the fact that there's more respect in the women and girls game? Why do you think there's such a difference in what the data is telling us?
I think it comes right from the very top with the WSL and down. The atmosphere at a women's game or a girls' game is just very different to a men's game or a boys' game. A lot more families attend WSL games. It's a much more pleasant atmosphere. The competitiveness is still there, but it's not as aggressive. Everything's a lot more positive. Everybody's a lot more friendly, and that's filtered down into the girls' game, I think. So I think it comes right from the very top. We do obviously have some issues of discipline, but as you say, a lot fewer in the boys' game. We see it, at club level and at league level, where there are girls playing. Even if it's a girl in a boys' team, we seem to see fewer. Girls change the dynamic. I think as well, it's still very much seen as a boys' game, a man's game. You've got to be a man, you've got to man up and all of that. Whereas obviously that doesn't apply to girls. So girls can just play. They're just free to just, have fun and play.
Right, fantastic.
And one thing that we hear, it's almost a little bit cliche now, I suppose, isn't it? That, when players or, young children see professional players in the men's game, abusing referees or surrounding referees or, all those negative behaviours, that they want to replicate it because they want to be like their heroes. Do you think the fact that the women's, certainly at WSL level, is much more respectful, there's, like you said, there's not as much aggression. Do you think that is in the same way that, boys try to replicate what's happening in the men's game, that girls almost replicate what's happening in the WSL in the terms of that level of respectness? And
I think you're right. And I mean, the referees that I've seen in the Women and Girls League have all been very respectful, and they're encouraging to both teams, which I've never seen in the men's game. So I think that helps as well. The referees themselves are, they're encouraging. I saw it last week. One of the girls took a foul throw and he stopped the game and he went back and he told her how to do a throw properly and he let her take it again. You wouldn't get that in the boys' league, I don't think, and certainly not in the men's league. And then when she'd taken the throw in again, he gave her a load of praise. And
makes a difference.
It really does. It really does. And when you've got somebody who's refereeing you, who's encouraging to both teams, and telling you you're doing a great job, and saying, that was a great tackle, and explaining how to do things that you might be unsure of or you might have got wrong.
Yeah. Why
would you want to abuse them? Why would you want to swear at them? Even if they've got something wrong, it's much more. Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah,
so what?
Absolutely.
Whereas in the men's game, if a referee makes a mistake, we're still talking about it weeks later. There's no way that was offside or
no. And do you think that's part of the challenge that the women's game has, that the bigger it gets, and it is obviously at the minute on a sort of a rapid growth, do you think that's one of the challenges that the game has in terms of maintaining that level of respect and that level, those sort of standards effectively?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we're starting off on a really good footing because it's in place. It would be a shame to lose it, but it would be something that would be lost rather than something we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So I think it is a challenge, and I really hope that we do maintain it. But I think all the signs are good that we will.
Yeah.
Touch wood.
Absolutely. So this is this weekend coming is the National Play Safe weekend, which is obviously a national sort of FA campaign to raise awareness and sort of activation around safeguarding, make sure everyone understands their role that they play in safeguarding, from youth football all the way up to the professional game. Obviously, we see activation in the Premier League, the AFL, WSL, right down to the grassroots game.
Yeah.
How does the campaign sort of resonate with you personally? How has your clubs and your league sort of embraced it?
Well, I think any national initiative is a great idea because it brings it to everybody's awareness. And even though it's only for one weekend, having that awareness will carry on week after week, hopefully. Both the clubs and the league, we've embraced it fully. We think that it's a fab initiative. They'll all be wearing their armbands, they'll be wearing the badges. We will, we'll put it on all of our socials, and really make a big thing about safeguarding for this weekend, explaining why it's important. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier about, getting information out there, making everybody aware of what is your role in safeguarding and how can you help these girls or boys or young men to have a really positive experience of football. Because the last thing we want is people leaving football because they're not enjoying it. So,
And it's quite a challenge, I imagine, as you know, in a role as a welfare officer. Obviously, you're a volunteer who's given up your time. It might feel like a full-time job without the pay. But what key steps do you sort of take to ensure that everyone, from players, parents, coaches, which is a massive challenge in itself, communicating with all of those, all of the time. How do you make sure that they're aware of what their role is within safeguarding?
As I said before, we encourage everybody to take the Safeguarding for Parents course so that they're aware. I try to get to as many games as I can, which obviously, given the amount of clubs that I look after and teams that I look after, it's not as many as I would like, but try to get to as many games as I can. Make everybody aware of who I am. At the beginning of each season, we always meet with all the parents, and I'm always part of that meeting, so I can introduce myself to new parents and new children. I always give a bit of a speech, what my role is, how they can come to me if they want. It's good at Barton Town because obviously we have the men's first team and reserve games that some of the children attend as well. So I'm there and they see me there. So I'll have a nice little chat with them. How's everything going? You're right. With the parents as well and the coaches, just making myself available. I think sometimes, certainly some coaches, they'll have something in the back of the mind and they're not sure, is it a safeguarding thing? Do I need to worry about this? They probably wouldn't pick up the phone and ring me as welfare officer. But if they see me at a game on a Saturday afternoon, they'll say, oh, let me just pick your brains. So things like that, that's always useful as well.
I think some really good tips there, Lynn, to be honest, for welfare officers or just clubs to pick up on. And that leads me into my next question really around, we get every season, we get new welfare officers coming forward, which is great and always good to see, new welfare officers coming onto the scene in grassroots football. A lot of them ask about compliance and they say, I need to get my compliance in order. We need to have all the coaches aligned where they need to be, which is absolutely correct. But then they sort of start to turn their attention onto some of the things around culture and environment at clubs. What advice would you have to new welfare officers about that particular aspect? So once they've got all their compliance in order, to look at the culture actually that's existing within the club they've just joined, what would be your advice to the new welfare officers in that position?
Go to games, go to training sessions, listen to how the coaches talk to the children, how they talk to the parents, how they involve the parents in the children's game, and just be really positive. Channel your inner Tigger, just bounce all over them, and just make sure that everybody's having a great time. Make everybody aware that if they've got any worries or any concerns or anything that they just want a sounding board for, you can be there for that. And that's it really. Just get involved, get stuck in, have a great time.
And do you think the key to being a good welfare officer is that level of presence, that constant, that safe person effectively to be able to, you sort of use the term soundboard a little bit, just to say, let me pick your brains, let me, what do you think of this? Is this something I need to be concerned about? That sort of thing. And that level of visibility, that level of presence is what makes it not easier, but, a bit more manageable.
I think so. I think that, obviously I've got different relationships with different coaches. Some I know better than others. Some I'm only just getting to know. The ones that I've known for years, they're much more likely to send me a WhatsApp message or something. This happened. Do I need to worry about it? The new ones, not so much. So trying to create those relationships with new people as well. I had a coach approach me at the reserves game on Tuesday. He never would have rang me to ask me, but because I was there, he just wanted to pick my brains because he's got a player on his team who's got some health needs. And what does he need to be worried about in terms of those health needs? Well, this player's 17. So I told him to speak to the player. And because nobody knows his health better than him.
Yeah.
The only thing I did advise as well is if he should be aware if that player has a head injury and he's knocked out and they need to call an ambulance, is there anything the coach needs to tell the ambulance about his care if he's not able to tell them himself?
Yeah.
And just having that conversation has reassured him. I think he was actually thinking he wasn't even going to play this player because he was so frightened about these additional health needs, and now we'll be playing at weekend. So, that's a good thing.
And obviously you're involved in, pretty much every pathway within grassroots football that you could possibly be involved with. So obviously the male sort of pathway, female and disability as well. Naturally, I imagine the challenges and the various aspects of that role change depending on the pathway that you're effectively trying to sort of deal with, I guess, in that aspect. Can you maybe tell us about a time or something where you've had to sort of step in or manage a safeguarding issue, and how you as a club welfare officer have handled that, just so those who are listening who aren't club welfare officers, haven't had to deal with that, sort of can get a bit of a better understanding as to what that role, what that intervention, I guess, looks like.
Yeah, so we had an incident with one of the players at the Inclusive Club. So that's a club for people with additional needs. A lot of them are neurodiverse. And a player approached us and said that he'd been bullied by another player. None of the coaches had witnessed any of this, but obviously we take bullying very seriously. So we suggested that the two players concerned joined us for a meeting with the parents, if they wanted to bring the parents. And we all sat down around a table, and the player that had initially made the allegations he felt confident enough to say the same thing while the accusee was in the room. And it turned out it completely misconstrued something that had happened. The player had said something as a joke. His neurodiversity meant he didn't take it as a joke. The other player was fully apologetic. And they went away the best of friends. With the player who'd been accused of bullying, actually in subsequent weeks, we observed him actually taking a little bit more care to make sure that other players were being really mindful of the other players' needs and being careful of the things that they said around him, which we thought was a really good outcome. Obviously, if it turned out that there had been bullying, we'd have handled it in a very different way. But that was just, really, really nice outcome. Two boys that had been friends, had fallen out, had been an allegation, became best of friends again, looked out for each other.
It maintains that level of positive environment, doesn't it, within a club setting? Because ultimately, at grassroots football, everyone's there to enjoy themselves, aren't they? They're there to have a good time, to enjoy the game in a safe, inclusive, enjoyable environment. So if you've been able to sort of maintain that from, what is an initial bit of a concern, then
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's important as well to say that, Ben, we get a lot of support from the FA in safeguarding from Ben, and I know that I can pick up the phone anytime if I've got any concerns, if I've got any worries about any of the clubs in the league or the clubs that I look after. Ben's on the other end of the phone or the other end of an email. And he nearly always gets back to me straight away. So only occasionally get an email saying, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to reply to that." But yeah, the support in place is there. I attended a meeting for people involved in welfare across sport for the region a couple of months ago, and I was blown away by how little support other sports get. Mm-hmm. And they were all very jealous of the support that's actually in place for football. It's there for you to access if you need to.
Fantastic. Well, that's always positive to hear that football is taking positive strides.
Yeah, Ben can pay me later for that.
It's moving swiftly on. All right, so I want to stay on the topic of inclusion, Lynn, really, because I think from our experience, there are a lot more clubs that are feeling more confident to take on inclusion disability pathways, which firstly is brilliant. Yeah. And that's fantastic to see. However, when they get to a point where they're going to offer a provision, they're often concerned about how coaches do they have the skill set, do they have the expertise, do they have the patience to essentially deliver a session, potentially to a group of young people or even, adults with some complex needs. What advice do you think you'd have to clubs that are at that stage of like, this is what we want to offer, but we're just not quite sure how it's going to go? Where do we get the right people from? What do we do? got any advice for those clubs that are in that position?
Yeah, so I think it's important for those clubs to realise that if they've already got a pathway and they've got, a lot of children actually coming and playing football within their clubs, they've probably already got players who have additional needs. They might not be aware of them, or they might not need any extra support in terms of playing football, but they've almost certainly got players with additional needs. So the first thing is for them not to be frightened of it. That there is nothing to be frightened of. It's, every child has their own individual needs, and each coach will have got used to the fact that, one child will appreciate being coached in a certain way, another child will appreciate being coached in a different way. A child with additional needs is exactly the same as that. They might need a slightly different approach, but they're already doing that with all the other kids. So, so that's the first thing really is just, just go for it. If it's a particular need pathway that they're looking at, then obviously they should educate themselves and make sure the coaches are educated in whatever that additional need is. We've got a lot of players with neurodiversity, as I said before. So it's important that our coaches recognise that those players may react in a way that we wouldn't necessarily expect. So understanding that their reactions are normal for them, and how we deal with those reactions, and being able to spot when a player potentially could be becoming heightened, what can we do to actually diffuse that situation and calm things down? And again, talking to the players, talking to the parents, finding out what works for that child. There's a player that we know occasionally gets heightened, particularly if things have not gone the way on the pitch. And all that player needs is to catch the eye of the coach who'll do that. And that's all that's needed. And that player will realise he's getting a little bit het up and he needs to calm himself down. He's then able to calm himself down because he knows the coach is seeing it, the coach is there.
Do you think there's, this is something we sometimes get, not regularly, I suppose, but sort of a level of inquiry about from coaches is that, that level of education that they might need or feel like they need a little bit of training around understanding neurodiversity and how that they tailor their approach. Do you think there's almost a level of, not qualification, but that just a little bit of need for further education to help coaches understand different players' needs, how they can adapt things? Because that ultimately is what creating an inclusive environment is, isn't it? Yeah,
I think that's a great idea. The only issue with that is neurodiversity is very diverse. So it's difficult to coach people on, on one size fits all, because one size doesn't fit all. But I suppose it's about giving that awareness that people may react to things in a very different way. The signs to potentially spot when players are becoming heightened, that kind of thing. I think there's definitely a piece of work that could be done there. That's definitely. And some of our deaf players that we've got at Inclusive, the coaches have actually come to us and requested that we find some kind of sign language course for them, which is brilliant. A lot of the signs that you would use on the pitch are sort of would be recognised by everybody. I got the ball. It's that works for a hearing person. It also works for a deaf person. So it's a lot of the things that people are frightened of. Actually, a lot of them are already in place. They're just not aware that they're in place because the two parts of the brain haven't connected.
Absolutely. I think some really good advice there and some golden nuggets there for people to take away. We're going to move on to sort of parents and spectators here. And I know, we probably could talk a whole nother podcast about where we are at the situation at the minute. But obviously in Lincolnshire, we've got an initiative out in youth football that one element of that focuses on parents and spectators. A rise in that level of behaviour from that element last season was a concern. So, our new positive matchday environments initiative focuses on that to try and get a better, more positive atmosphere at youth football. What do you think, from your club perspective, with your club hat on, What do you think clubs can do with that group of people? Because I think a lot of clubs that I speak to are quite, they don't know what to do. They don't know what direction to take with the parent and spectator body, because I think they feel a bit of a detachment to those people because they might not know them as well. Have you got any advice for those clubs that are in a position where they're not really sure to do, if they've got maybe an inconsistent spectator body, a few issues here and there in some of their teams? What advice would you give them?
Get them involved. It's, if you've got a parent who's being very negative towards the players on the pitch, get them involved so that they can see from the other side the change that happens when you're positive. If you praise them, tell them they've done something well, they'll do it again and again and again, because we all want to be praised, don't we? We all want to be told we've done something well. So my first advice will be try and get them involved, so that you can convert them from the inside almost. If that's not possible, then just create the most positive environment that you can. Human nature says that we'll have our behaviour will mirror what everybody else's behaviour is. If everybody else is being encouraging and there's just one person that's being discouraging, sooner or later that behaviour will change because everybody else is being encouraging. So you can get the other parents to shout as loudly as they can, as long as it's positive. What we wouldn't want is 90% of the parents being silent and the only 10% you can hear is the ones that are being negative. Get the other 90% involved in being positive and encouraging and cheering the players on and telling them what a great job they're doing.
I think that's also a good example to bring into Play Safe Weekend, isn't it? In the sense that Play Safe Weekend doesn't just have to be about the players or the coaches. It's just as much about the parents as it is the coaches. And getting them involved in that weekend is really important.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so, yeah. And get everybody involved, you know.
Absolutely. And do you think that's maybe where, obviously we're almost bringing up another sort of campaign now, but the Silent Support Weekend's almost bringing their own sort of element of, parents aren't saying anything, although it's not, obviously not saying anything positive, I guess, but they're not saying anything negative either, but it is just that round of applause. It allows, obviously, the players to sort of hear what each other is saying. It allows them to make their own decisions. Do you think that's maybe then where it lends itself to, and we hear all the time that the players love Silent Support Weekend and the parents hate it.
Yeah.
But do you think that's potentially why?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a child that's playing that knows that, his parent, carer, granddad, whoever is likely to turn up and he's likely to be less than positive, he's anxious before he's even stepped foot on the pitch. And, he's playing always worried about what he's going to hear, what other people are going to think, how his teammates might react to him because of what his parent or carer is saying or doing on the sidelines. Silent Weekend allows all of those anxieties to just disappear before he's even started to kick a ball. Yeah.
And I suppose like a really good analogy I heard about it was, imagine, you're trying to make a cup of tea, for example, and every little action you do, somebody is shouting, put the tea bag in the cup, put the milk in, all that sort of thing. So then you're almost putting yourself in the shoes.
Yeah, you can hear somebody over there saying, put the tea bag in the cup, put the hot water on. You can hear somebody over there saying, no, put the milk in first. You can hear somebody over there saying, no, sugar goes first. And you don't actually know which one to listen to. And if you're a child, you've had, all of your life hearing your mum and dad's voice, that's what you're going to tune into. But actually what we want is for you to tune into the coach's voice.
Yeah.
But that's really difficult. So often the things that they're saying are conflicting with what the coach is actually trying to get the team to do. And the coach is looking after the entire team, don't forget. So the parent might be wanting, their child to push up and score a goal, but actually the coach has put them in a more midfield role and doesn't want them pushing up because he wants them passing the ball to another player. And, that's really difficult when you've got the parents telling them to do something that's going against what the coach wants them to do. So I think but to some extent, you can counteract that by the coaches explaining to the parents, just as as the coach would explain to the players, this is the formation and this is what I want you to do. The coach is perfectly at liberty to go and explain to the parents, I'm trying a different formation today. I know your lad normally plays up front, but I've asked him to pull back a little bit today. So it'd be really good if you could encourage him to take on that midfield role and, tell him he's done a great job if he does a pass. I'm not expecting him to score today, that kind of thing. And then the parents know what to expect. If the parents don't know that going into the game, then they're going to think that their child is potentially just being lazy, sitting and hanging around midfield instead of pushing up. He should be pushing up. So with the best will in the world, they're just trying to encourage their child. But in that situation, it's not necessarily the right thing to do. But coaches can communicate with parents.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, we've seen some really positive examples, certainly in the first few opening weeks of the season around, obviously, the new positive match day environment sort of initiative. And we've heard examples of coaches, obviously with the respect barriers and the technical area and respect marshals, had really good examples of coaches going to the parents and saying, look, this is why the respect barrier is in place. This is why we've got technical areas. This is why we've got the respect marshals. This is what we expect at our club. We're trying to create a positive environment. It's all about the kids, that those really positive sort of conversations, and they might seem really small, and some might even say, or some might believe, slightly insignificant, but actually it has a big impact. In terms of what your hopes are for the future of safeguarding grassroots football, so I suppose both sort of locally and a bit, nationally, I guess, is that where you hope to see grassroots football get to, with that level of safeguarding? Is there other things that you hope to see?
Yeah, I mean, the data doesn't lie, does it? So I would hope to see fewer reports of discipline coming in, fewer complaints about parents, fewer complaints about coaches. I mean, obviously the gold standard would be every single child that plays football has a really positive experience and enjoys the football. And, it can give them something that they're going to enjoy for the rest of their life. I mean, we at Barton Inclusive, we have a teeny tot session that starts at age 2, and then we have walking football players that are well into their 80s. If you can give somebody something that's going to give them pleasure for the whole of their lifespan, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the actual sort of play safe weekend, how do you see that sort of taken on within your settings from a player's perspective? So obviously players will be aware that it's play safe weekend. Is it something that the players know about, they look forward to, they even ask questions around safeguarding, that sort of thing as well?
Yeah, so obviously all the players are aware. The coaches have spoken to them and explained to them what this weekend's all about. They'll have their captain's armbands, which they're very excited about because obviously they're new and the ones from last year are getting a little bit threadbare now. So it's an opportunity to have that conversation, which we all do safeguarding, we all know about it, but we don't necessarily talk about it very often. So these kind of initiatives are an opportunity to have those conversations with the children, with the coaches, with the parents, explain what the initiative is, and also explain that whilst this is this weekend, what we're doing lasts all year round. It's not just for this weekend, it's for the entire season and the closed season and everything in between.
Fantastic. Lynn, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on and to talk to you about all the brilliant things that you do within your roles. All I can really say is that we can't wait to see all the positive things that you're doing, obviously at Barton Inclusive, Barton Town, the massive growth within the Women and Girls League as well, and obviously see you continue to create a positive environment for everyone. Yeah,
there'll be play safe stuff all over the socials of all of them, I'm sure.
Fantastic. Lynn, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.